12 Hats Radio, the marketing podcast with a difference.
Good morning, it's Monday the 9th of November 2020 and you're listening to 12 Hats Radio, the marketing podcast with a difference. Now today's special guest is Eran Thomson from Sydney. He's an American expat. He's got a background in comedy, in particular improv, but he's delved into other areas and he's invented a game called Saga, which is kind of like Cards Against Humanity, but it's all about bringing out music memories. And the great thing about music, it always brings you back to a time and place, and this really taps into it. And we actually play around later in this episode. I may stress that this is not a paid promotion. No cash is exchanged hands. This is just pure publicity for the sake of it, and I do recommend it. And for you, dear listener, there is a link in the show notes so you can get your hands on Saga. So without further ado, let's roll. Folks, welcome back to 12 Hats Radio, and today in the studio we've got Eran Thomson, who's a comedian, come entrepreneur, come inventor of a game. And Eran, as of all my guests, can you give us a quick rundown on what you're all about?
Oh, thanks, Dave. I guess if I were to try and summarize what I'm all about, I'm into a lot of different things. Across the span of my career, I've worked as an advertising creative director, a writer, a storyteller. I've been an entrepreneur for the last probably 5 to 10 years. I founded a few different businesses, including Laugh Masters Academy, which was Australia's first long-form improv comedy school. I also established a corporate training business, which applies the fundamental philosophies of improvisation and transplants them into a corporate context called Improv. And my most recent kind of a little adventure was in the fintech space, where we created a new superannuation business, which has now been sold. So yeah, and like you said in the intro, right now my kind of focus is spreading joy with a new game I've developed called Saga.
Yeah. Now, I had a look at Saga. It's like, if you want to play, how can I describe it? It's like playing Cards Against Humanity if you're out over at Molly Meldrum's house.
If you're at whose house?
Molly Meldrum.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, you know Molly from Countdown? The Cat in the Hat?
Molly Countdown. I'm Googling now. Hang on. Molly Countdown.
He's done so much for the Australian music industry.
Oh, this is embarrassing. I should know. Well, you could. Oh, Molly Meldrum. Right. Countdown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I do know who that is. I have lived here for about 15 years, but I've never been an avid television watcher, but I am aware of who that person is. Yeah. Countdown. Cool. Right on. Yeah, cool. It's it would be like that. And Cards Against Humanity is a great kind of comparison. We love that, obviously, because Cards Against Humanity is such a amazingly fun and popular game. One of the very first people to play Saga in our first playtest group said something similar to you. He said, "I love this. It's like Cards Against Humanity, but I could play it with my kids." It's slightly lesser scale, or at least you are your own censor, so you don't have to necessarily share anything you don't want to. Yeah,
absolutely. So how that all came about? What's the inspiration behind it?
Well, the sort of origin story for Saga comes from, I guess, personally, my wife always tells me that I make everything into a game, whether that's making a cup of tea and trying to see how far away I can stand and still throw a tea bag into the cup, or, emptying the dishwasher. I can find a way to gamify that. And so I was kind of doing the similar thing with music streaming. I think one of the cool things that's happened in our lifetimes is we went from, having maybe 1,000 songs in our pocket, as Steve Jobs famously said when they introduced the iPod, to now we've got kind of all the songs in our pocket, right? And so with a streaming music platform like Spotify or Apple Music or whatever anyone uses, you've got access to all this music. And it got me thinking about how we could gamify that experience. And the way it kind of started organically was my wife and I just used to sort of, COVID time, staying home, listening to music, dance parties for two in the lounge room, trying to like out DJ each other. And we started making up all these different rules around, like, if you play a good song, you can play the next song, but if you play a bad song, you skip a turn. And and over time, this simple idea of just trying to like listen to the next perfect song became this really complicated, really difficult to remember game. And we had like a Google Doc that had all these rules. And so I knew that there was something in the idea of gamifying that music streaming and music listening experience, but I didn't quite know how to go about it. And I just let it percolate in my brain for a while. And then fast forward a few months, and we were having a dinner party with some friends, and it happened to be the anniversary of my wife's father, or my father-in-law's death. He died a couple of years before, and it was on that night that we were having dinner and drinks with friends that was the anniversary of that. And so my wife said, we're having a lot of fun, but would it be all right if I played a song that reminds me of my dad? And we were all like, yeah, of course. So she pulled out Spotify and she played this Beatles song, and she told this really beautiful story about how her and her dad bonded over music. He kept all his records in his wood shop so he could play music loud and not disturb his wife. And they used to go in there and dance in the sawdust, and and it was this really special story and moment for all of us. And then one of our other friends said, I have a song and a story that reminds me of my dad. And then we realized that we all did. And the range of stories that we shared were deep and meaningful, like Amy, my wife, to silly and ridiculous. Like one of the guys was like, well, the song that reminds me of my dad is like a kid's bath time song that I remember spending quality time with my dad that way. And anyway, to make a long story short, when on the car ride home, I was like, I think that is the crux of the game. And we went very quickly from that evening to our first prototype.
Fantastic stuff. And just moving on to another hat, so to speak, so it's 12 Hours Radio, of course. What's the one thing you knew now that you wish you knew at the start of your journey?
Just like generally speaking, in terms of like career stuff.
Yeah, career stuff.
Look, I mean, it's a little bit probably cliche, right? But it's don't chase money, chase joy. I think if you chase joy, the money will follow. At least that's the theory, right? I spent the first half of my career in advertising and marketing, which is a creative and rewarding industry. And I enjoyed my time there. It was also a decision that was based primarily on my ability to generate an income for myself, and at the expense of focusing time and energy on other things that I'm good at or enjoy. So I think my biggest piece of advice there for any of your listeners would be to try as early as you can in your life or your career to find your unique ability and take that and run with it and just really embrace it and go for it.
That's some spot on advice. Someone told me that 20 years ago I wouldn't have this path, but then again, everything's a squiggly line in it. So
yeah.
And what are some of the great resources that have helped you along your journey?
Oh man, well, for me, I'm a massive believer in sort of personal development, and however you interpret that and whatever works for you is what's really the most important thing, right? So I would say finding people or a person who can help you identify and eliminate or at least deal with any of your limiting beliefs or fears that might be holding you back is crucial, right? And especially if you're going to go out on your own and start a business. I always say to people that the fastest, or one of the fastest tracks to your own personal development and growth is to start a business. And the title of your podcast alludes to this perfectly, right? Which is, when you start a business, when you leave a business, right? You've had one job, one thing you were doing, one thing you were great at, and you probably were so confident and so capable in that one role that you sort of got it to a place where you're like, I can do this better than the place I work at. I'm going to go start my own business of whatever that is, right? And then you suddenly realize that you're no longer just wearing that one hat. You're wearing the marketing hat. You're wearing the finance hat. You're wearing the new business hat, and the other, 9 hats that your podcast title probably refers to, and probably even more, right? So that trajectory is so confronting, or can be confronting, and that is the opportunity for growth, right? Anytime you have an issue or a problem that keeps repeating itself, I call those stackers. So if you see things kind of stacking up in front of you and you're present and aware enough to recognize that that's happening, you can use that as an opportunity to dig deep and figure out, like, all right, what's the belief system here that's causing this stuff to keep happening to me? And how do I change? And who are the people around me that can help me change so that I'm not stuck there and I can keep moving forward?
And is there anything out there that you've read or listened to lately that has really inspired you?
Yeah, I'm late to the party on the Watchman TV series, which I think was nominated for like 28 Emmys and won 12, if I remember correctly. So that series has been out for a year, but I just cottoned onto it, and man, I think it's a masterpiece of storytelling and filmmaking, and I'm recommending that to everyone. Oh, you've seen it? Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. I read the graphic novel and seen the film as well. So,
that's interesting. So I wasn't a big comic guy, and so I wasn't actually really even familiar with the characters of the world before I saw the show. What did you think? How good a job did you think that they did kind of translating it from the page to the screen?
I think it's faithful. I mean, the thing about the Watchmen is that it's always gonna bloody polarize people. So people either love it to bits or going to hate it. But I think it's quite truthful, and I think it's great they actually adapted it to this time period, because the original book was set in 1985.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it felt very relevant, for where the world is right now. Certainly for where America is right now. Yeah, I found it quite powerful. The other thing that I just finished is a book called How to Change Your Mind, or maybe it's just Change Your Mind, by a guy called Michael Pollan. And Michael Pollan, his book is about, it's essentially about the exploration, research, and understanding of the role that psychedelics like LSD and magic mushrooms can play in our lives as a healing agent and a tool for personal development and growth. And it's fascinating, right? It's a really interesting book, which I would recommend to anyone who's interested in any of the things we've just talked about.
Yeah. And they'll be in and the links to those books will be in the show notes there, folks. Moving right along, what is the one, like, you're also in the improv comedy area, sorry. What is the one myth about improv comedy that you wish to dispel right now?
What's the myth of improv comedy that I wish to dispel? Well, look, I would say off the top of my head, the very first thing that comes to mind is that improv is not really about being funny, right? Yeah. In fact, if you've ever seen an improv show where people are trying to be funny, it often isn't. It feels forced and kind of even uncomfortable as an audience member. I think most comedy, and even maybe some stand-up, to be truthful, is really about making an authentic connection with your audience and being open and honest. And, of course, people are trying to get a laugh. Like if they're up on stage, whether they're an improviser or a stand-up, they're there to entertain, there to make people laugh and have a good time. But my theory is that laughter is sort of a like a byproduct of unconscious recognition, right? Someone on a stage saying something or doing something that resonates with us. Usually, I think because it has a ring of truth or authenticity. Like, how many comedians have said things that you've thought, but you would never dare say, right? But they say it, and you're like, I thought that, right? So, I feel like there's something in that about being authentic, being real, being present. And the comedy comes from an audience being able to recognize that authenticity and truth, right? Truth in comedy. It's an expression for a reason.
You reckon that could translate well into the marketing space where, we're setting up brands and be more authentic?
Yeah, I mean, authenticity for brands is becoming more and more important, right? Especially as, like whatever it is you're looking into, whether you need a new toaster or a new lounge or a new car or a new phone, you can find out what a lot of people think about it really easily, right? Marketing didn't used to have to worry about that, right? People only knew what they could see in a magazine or on television, but now you get to find out what thousands of people think about your brand. You go on Amazon and read reviews. You go on to TechCrunch and read reviews. You go on to sites like the Wirecutter and read reviews. And so brands are now, I think, being held accountable in a way that they never could be before. And so that authenticity and transparency even becomes more and more important, and perhaps maybe even the most important thing, right? If you believe that some types of products, like take cleaning products, for example, are more or less parody products, like any one of them will do a pretty good job on your windows. So which one is the one that comes in a recyclable bottle? Which one is the one that donates, or money to a cause or plants a tree every time you buy it, or, offers refills so you don't have to keep buying another bottle? Like that kind of stuff is, I think, where and how businesses are starting to win.
Yeah. And of course, life's not all about success. Have you had any failures or fuck ups in the past? And if so, what were the lessons learned?
Yeah, I've definitely had some failures and fuck ups, as you said. Look, I think going back to your first question, chasing money, has never quite led me to the place that I'd hoped. Starting a business with the wrong people is definitely something that you want to think carefully about, and not playing to your strengths and unique abilities, right? I've spent time in businesses doing things I could do, but I wasn't great at. And that's a recipe for disaster, whether it's short-term or long-term. It eventually catches up with you. So I mean, at a very top level, without going into gritty detail, those would be some of the things that I've experienced. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's driving your curiosity right now?
Right now, I guess there's two things. The most kind of current thing is literally about 20 minutes before you and I started recording this, the vice presidential debate in America just finished. And man, just watching those two people, Kamala Harris and Pence, kind of like this are two completely different worldviews those people have, and seeing them on the same stage and watching them confront each other is just shocking. And so I'm really curious about the state of America right now. I'm curious to see how that election falls out. It's bonkers what's going on over there. You can't look away. So that's driving my curiosity. And I guess the other thing is 2 years ago, I did a comedy show, my very first solo comedy show at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, called The Near Death Experience. And based on the success of that, I decided to write a book that has more of the stories that I wasn't able to tell in my short show. So I've been working on a book, and I guess I'm really curious now about trying to understand the pros and cons of trying to get a publisher for a title or self-publishing, and just what that means, and where the credibility and access to sales lies with something like that. So I'm kind of learning about that.
absolutely. And finally, to wrap things up, have you got a lighthearted story for our listeners?
Have I got a lighthearted story? uh, Probably. Actually, you know what? If you want, we can play a Song Saga card.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And maybe
Why
that
not?
will spark a story. So I'll pull 3 cards, and then you and I can decide which one you want to, which one we want to play.
This is great content marketing, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah. Okay. So let's see. I've pulled 3 random cards. Are you filming? Do you film your podcast?
No, it's audio only, but I'll
Audio
read them out.
Okay. So the first card I pulled was Terrible Neighbours. So
Right.
if that sparks a song and a story for you, let me know. The second card is First Concert. What's the song? What's the story? And the third card is Gay Bar. What's the song? What's the story? So Terrible Neighbours, First Concert, Gay Bar.
Right, Terrible Neighbours.
Terrible Neighbours. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so my younger years, I backpacked around Europe. And I was living in a resort up in Scotland, and we had a share house, and I can't really name songs, but it was just Indian Bhangra music.
Yeah.
They were playing it to about 4 in the morning, and I had to get up at 6, and I got really grumpy.
Yep.
So I know they were asleep. So once I knocked off my shift, I got my CD on. I found it some death metal. I think it was Sepultura. I think it was. Or just cranked it up. Got my revenge.
What was the death metal song? What did you play?
It was Sepultura, Roots, Bloody Roots.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, that'll wake some people up, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt.
Okay, what's the
I'll go First Concert.
First concert? Okay.
Yeah. So First Concert, my first concert was Grandmaster Flash and the Sugar Hill Gang.
Wow.
Do you know who they are? Yeah.
I do know they are.
Way back.
Right into hip-hop, so, yeah.
And the song that comes to mind is Apache, Jump on It. Down, 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 down. Kimosabe, Jump on It. Right? And that would be Sugar Hill Gang. And the story was, so I went to high school in the US in just outside Philadelphia, and the kind of urban hip hop radio station there was called WDAS FM. And they used to have a guy called DJ Red Alert, who became quite famous, who ran this kind of really awesome hip hop radio show. And they announced that they were giving away free tickets to that concert. And this is back in the day when you had to phone in, right? And so I immediately called all my friends and said, you have to call the radio station and try and win tickets, and sort of gamified the process of trying to win tickets. And my girlfriend's best friend won them. And so I was like, and so of course they wanted to go together, and I was like, no way, I'm the one who organized this whole scheme. You have to take me. And as it turned out, my girlfriend wasn't that excited about it anyway. So me and her best friend drove out to this part of Philly that I'd never been to before. And we were the only 2 white people at that show, which didn't bother us, but it was very observable. And what I remember was her name was Kenna. She was a bit nervous. And I was like, well, let's go to the front row. Nothing will happen to us if we go all the way up to the front. And so we pushed our way up to the front of the stage. And, this is there was guys on unicycles and crazy outfits. It was a bonkers show. But everybody was looking at us normally if you try and nudge your way up at any concert, people were like, give you looks, or they don't want you to let you, because then you're going to be in front of them. But people were so gobsmacked by the fact that there was these two young, like white high school kids there, that they just sort of like parted the waters, like Moses parting the Red Sea, and just like it just opened up a path right to the front row. And I think everyone was bugging out. Anyway, we had a great time. We survived. Nothing happened. We just danced and laughed and sang and, had a good time. So yeah. So my song is Apache by the Sugar Hill Gang. And my story is being the only white people at a concert.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's so then congratulations, man. You've played a round of Song Saga. There's more to the game too, there's different cards that are award cards that you give each other, and when you win a round, you get a U-Rock card, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that makes it super fun. But at its simplest, it's really about using those cards that are in the box to prompt a memory of the music and moments that matter to you, and get you sharing your stories and the soundtrack of your life, and kind of connecting with your friends in ways that you might not otherwise. Right. And my favorite quote from with playing with some friends was a guy said to another friend of ours, dude, I've known you for 20 years and I never knew that about you. And I just think that is such a special thing for a silly game to be able to unlock that kind of connection is really cool.
And to wrap things up, is there anything I didn't ask but should?
Is there anything you didn't ask but should? Yes, it's how can people get a copy of Song Saga? And the answer to that is song-saga.com. Yeah, so we are on pre-order right now. We have our next batch of games coming in November, so we'll be able to deliver games for Christmas. And we're on pre-order in the US on Amazon.com, and pre-order on our website at song-saga.com. Thanks for not asking.
where else can we find you out there in the interwebs?
Yeah, me personally, the easiest way to kind of see what I'm doing and what I'm up to is just on my personal website, which is eranthomson.com. I'm a dry Thompson, so there's no P, so it's just ERANTHOMSON.com. And yeah, anything that anyone wants to know, that's where they'll find it.
No worries. And Eran, thank you very much for coming onto the show.
Dave, thank you very much for inviting me to be on 12 Hats in the beginning. I really appreciate being here, and keep up the good work.
This has been a Podcasts West production. Want to hear next week's show today? Sign up as a patron for as little as $5 per month. And support your local independent media. Go to patreon.com/12hatsradio.